We are on air, Keith Armonaitis, and there's like this old TV show that you may or may not remember. This is your life, Keith Armonaitis.
Good to see you again, Cal.
Yeah, this is really great to see you. You and I have a bit of a history, which I will allude to. But firstly, I want to officially tell everybody the title of this. It's Keith Armonaitis. Did graduate Rutgers in 90 and Stevens Tech with a master's in 01. But you're a Renaissance man, and you're an IT guy, and you've done comedy and acting and screenwriting and directing. And that's segment one of this interview. Segment two, and I'm so fascinated by this, recognizing the catalysts in your life. It's kind of heavy. So I'm done with my intro. I'm going to turn it over to you, do a little bio, and we can jump in to some of the early Keith Armonaitis, some of the work you've done, which I've seen so much of film-wise. So take it away, Keith.
Yeah, so, and thank you, Cal, again for having me. As always, the problem with us talking is never about, finding something to say. It's more about how do we both cut off our loquacious nature and just kind of narrow it down to something that isn't going to bore the tears out of every single person watching. So just a little bit about myself as you went into, I went to Rutgers, initially started off at Mason Grove School of the Arts as BFA in acting. Soon after that, I kind of migrated over into a couple of other things that I did before finally graduating with my acting degree from Rutgers. And then, as I went into trying to actually make money as an actor, as I'm sure that you're aware, as any other actor who is trying to make it is aware, it's a very tough row to hoe, especially if you're trying to not live in your parents' basement and you like things like a car that runs. So one of my hobbies as a kid had always been working with electronics and computers. I'd actually built my first computer when I was 9 years old. Thankfully, I had a teacher at my grammar school that believed in trying to funnel some small amount of money into kids' passions in order to try and get them going. So she had actually bought me a computer kit that I put together. And, as I started going on, I wasn't the type of person to wait tables. I did a lot of IT work, computer work, programming, etc. And eventually you get to a point where you have to decide which way you want to go. And it's funny because as we look back in our lives, we can sometimes identify key points along the roads, the crossroads, and the paths that we took. I'd actually been going in as a guest at CBGB's. They used to have an improv troupe, and I had been going in there and doing some improv with them when I was actually trying to do stand-up comedy, because I thought for some reason that would be easier than trying to be an actor. And I remember getting a phone call. I was actually at work at a programming job, and the woman who ran the troupe had told me that the rest of the troupe had really liked the work I was doing. They wanted me to join, and I literally broke down on the phone, and I was telling her, I said, "Oh, I'm at this crossroads. I'm trying to decide what to do with my life, and this couldn't have come at a better time, and I have to decide because I have to be at work at 9 in the morning, and getting home at 4 in the morning doesn't really help out with that." And I said, "So, how much does it pay?" And she just said, "Oh, Keith. Oh, Keith." And that's when I actually went into IT in order to kind of, have a career in that. And the funny thing is about urges, especially creative urges, is that the more you suppress them, the more they want to pop out. And within a few years, I realized that, community theater and, little things I was doing here and there wasn't enough. So I got into screenwriting, and I had I think this is like 1997. I had given myself a deadline where I had to write a full-length screenplay before the millennium, right? So before, 2000 party over out of time, right? I wanted to have a screenplay done. So I wrote my first screenplay. It took me a couple of years to put it together. And by the time I was done, I thought that I had something that was absolutely amazing. It wasn't, but it was an accomplishment. And I actually had people that read it, and the kinder ones actually told me about, where I really needed to start focusing in terms of the the discipline in order to write if I really wanted to do it. And again, those crossroads, and I decided, what, this is something I can do while I'm earning a living. I can write, and that's what I did. And for many years, I wrote screenplays. I eventually became the president of the New Jersey Screenwriters Association, and I realized that, as much as I was writing stuff, and I'd go to pitch fests and I'd pitch stuff, and I got a lot of requests. I had a few of my scripts optioned, but nothing ever got made. I just, again, it was like I was at this strange crossroads. It's like, well, what are you going to do? And that's how I found the independent film community. And we'll get into a little bit of that later on when we talk about catalysts. But it was through there that I actually met people that produced my first film. And now I've got 3 under my belt. I would have had a 4th one if it weren't for COVID. But we've got 3 films, and all of them have actually won awards. They've done very, very well, and I'm proud of them. And so,
you certainly should be. I want to interject that I've seen your films,
Mhm.
and one, Mist has achieved so many awards, and it has resonated with the LGBTQ community because it's so powerful. And then even closer for me is Be Home Soon, which I'll actually show everybody. It's a little film poster from Be Home Soon, which you long before the COVID set in, you had written and directed this, which to me, and again, I call it as I see it, but it was one of the most powerful examples of domestic abuse that I'd ever seen. And we discussed this before we went on air. What makes this so powerful is it resonates even more now than ever before with COVID. With people being thrown together for 9 or 10, 11 to 12 months in small quarters, and the ravages and the effects. And we talked about this. So I've become such a champion of that film and talk about it all the time in my new world and what I'm doing. So
and I just want to take a moment, because you talk about how powerful it is as a writer and a director. The one beautiful thing about filmmaking is that it's such a collaborative process, and that film would not have worked if it wasn't for the talents of Heather Britton O'Scanlan. She really brought something to life that when I was writing it, I actually had her in mind pretty much from the start, only because I'd seen her in other roles. And, there's something about her that, in all the roles that I've seen her in, there's always this spark. And I knew that she could bring out the hidden life of the character. And I think if it weren't for her, that film, it probably would have been okay, but I really think that it was powerful because of what she brought to it. So as much as I'd love to take all the credit for it, I really can't, because she was able to get that hidden life to come out on screen, and without without any dialogue.
No dialogue. That's one of the most powerful, truly, filmmaking wise powerful. And as far as, and I certainly agree that her acting, her face, the emotion, well, it really is such a powerful, it should almost, be seen by masses of population so they can begin to grasp the effects
Mhm.
of,
Oh, I would love that, obviously.
truly, and from my experience. So I want to, let's see, in my questions, I don't know if you did go back after Rutgers some years later, and you did get a master's. And to me, this is, take my hat off. You did get a master's from Stevens Institute.
Yeah. So it was, it's one of the interesting things about going into the IT profession is that I think more so than probably any other career other than being a doctor, uh, what you've amassed in terms of degrees or you know certificates, certificate programs or whatever. IT is probably the biggest one. And when you're trying to sell yourself as a theater major that does computer programming, it kind of it doesn't matter what you've done in the past. I mean, you could have like, oh yeah, I developed Twitter. They would be like, yeah, but you're a theater major. It's like, yeah, well, that's it's incongruous. And I really think that if I had been trying to get a job today, like I was back then, I would have gotten no interviews whatsoever because, the nature of how people look at resumes nowadays, it's all electronic with, flags that are set up so that it filters everything out. I would have never gotten past the filters. But the nice thing is that once I was actually able to sit down and talk to somebody face to face, that's really been kind of the more powerful part of me. It's I if you look at me on paper, it seems like I'm all over the place. But then when I get to sit down and talk, you realize that it's not just a jack of all trades type of thing. It's I actually have pretty deep knowledge on a lot of subjects, and when it comes to IT, I happen to know quite a bit about. Well, not so much anymore. I mean, it's growing at a pace that I can't keep up with. But back then, you could see that I had a very deep knowledge on all of the pieces that needed to be there for a good IT professional. So
The 9 to 5
yeah.
you spend at.
Oh yeah. So I'm at right now I'm the head of the innovation lab for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So I was actually at the forefront of putting together a lot of the real-time systems that people are actually able to see on the websites, developed a few mobile apps for them, really just tried to figure out better ways to let the people of New York and New Jersey know how to use, the PATH train or the buses or whatever. I'd actually been a managerial consultant before that, and I had wanted to do something for the people, not just for a bunch of stockholders that I would never meet. I really wanted to make a difference for a lot of people, and hopefully changes for the better. And so, unfortunately, public service is the only way you could really do that. And as much as people talk about how the government can't do anything right or this, that, and the other thing, the reality is that, a lot of things that we do, especially at the Port Authority, are things that, you would not be able to get companies, publicly traded companies to do. I mean, we accept a lot of risk. Building bridges and tunnels do not have a return on investment that's measured in a couple of years. It's not like in the third quarter, after spending $3 billion to rebuild a bridge, you're going to start seeing money coming back. You're talking about 30, 40, 50 years down the road. And so there are parts of the government that are necessary and are effective because they're willing to do things that, even if it doesn't make money, it benefits the general welfare of the populace. And so that's my take on government, the way I look at it, and my role in it, because I really want to help people. And that's one of the ways that I was able to do that. Then, of course, the other way is the arts, but the arts, you can't put foot on the table. So, yeah, it can be very difficult to do that.
Yes. So we've just done segment one. Your I think amazing history and the work you've done, and certainly what we've heard certainly qualifies you as an exemplary Renaissance guy. But
you.
now to some heavier thoughts, and this is not a particular area I'm going to learn now, like everybody else is going to learn, about the world of catalysts.
Yeah.
And why don't you define that, and then we'll go into some Q&A.
Right. So, I mean, the idea of the catalyst comes directly from chemistry, where it's a chemical reagent that's added at a certain point in time that actually causes some form of chemical process to occur. And, a lot of it's kind of an esoteric kind of definition of it, but when you really think about it is, if you pour yourself a glass of Diet Coke, if you pour it fast, it might bubble over a little bit, but it's manageable. But if you throw a whole bunch of Mentos in it, it'll explode, right? And so, that's the type of change that we're talking about, And when I talk about catalysts, as in people in my life, I talk about people that have so profoundly changed me at key points in my life that I'm almost unrecognizable from the person that I was before. And I think that if we all look back in our histories, we can identify certain people who may only have been in our lives for a brief period of time, but have affected great change in who and what we are. And we'll talk a little bit more about the idea of both good and bad catalysts, but I'd like to focus on the ones that were good in my life, because I think that if you look at the person that I am today, and I were actually able to point to the interactions that I had with these people and explain how they changed my worldviews in some way, it actually makes a lot of sense. And so, there's a few people that I'd like to kind of talk about who kind of came into my life. In my description of myself, I talked about how I was in the gifted and talented program in my grade school, which basically means I was a smart kid, and I built my first computer when I was 9, which means that I was a nerd. So smart kids and nerds back then. It's not like today where there's a certain level of acceptance of that, but it was a kid who got picked on a lot. I mean, I was bullied a lot as a kid. But you learn how to survive things well enough. But I remember, I had a small circle of friends, but I was never really anything more than just this kind of nerdy kid that read a lot of science fiction and played around with electronic kits. And then I'll never forget one day when we were in 7th grade. We had a new kid that moved into Rochelle Park, where I grew up, and this guy Joe Magarelli, Mags. He came in and he wore a denim jacket, and he rode a dirt bike to school, and he was just and you looked at him and you're like, wow, this is this is completely different than anything I was used to. And as the new kid, it was very difficult integrating as well. So I actually became friends with him because, he's the new kid. He didn't know that I was some nerdy weird kid that liked, science fiction. And then we started talking, and it turned out he had a computer. And I was like, what? I go, you're this cool guy and you got a computer? And so we became very fast friends. And he and I, we spent quite a bit of time together, mainly, working on his computer and trying to figure things out. I remember there was an adventure game that we played or whatever. But what he did was he actually changed my worldview and opened it up, where, I realized that there were ways that I could still be myself, but there could be this cooler side of me. And, that actually completely changed my worldview, and it helped broaden my horizons, and it helped me to open up. And after that, I found a good sense of humor, and, my wit became the thing that protected me. So, in between a flurry of punches, I could make fun of somebody, and, even if I got beat up, everybody was laughing at the bully because I made him look bad. So that, I mean, that's kind of a sad way to put it, but it actually changed the way I interacted with people. And, Joe, by the time we got to high school, he had moved again. And so he was in my life for about 2 years, and I hadn't seen him again, actually until about 10 years ago. I put together a reunion for my grade school, and he and I are still friends now. And, but it was just such a great interaction at that time that it really changed the course of my life. And I don't know if he knows that, but if he watches this, now he does. So thanks, Mags. You helped start me on the road to where I am today. And then, of course, I went to Rutgers, and all through high school and into college, my focuses were mainly on myself, as most people of that age are. Is very it was very self-centered. And then I met the second person in my life who was a really big catalyst, and that was my friend Kathy McCartney. And Kathy actually showed me that there's an entire world that you need to care about, not just yourself. And originally, I had kind of wanted to be with her because she was just good looking. She's a very attractive woman. And but we became friends, and she started showing me that there's this entire world that I need to care about. And just caring for myself, having this self-centered view of the world is not something that's sustainable, especially for the species that we're talking about, right? So, as a species, we need to kind of care about more than just ourselves. Otherwise, we're not going to survive. And it's self-centeredness that really gets us into the problems that we're in today. And then, of course, the third real catalyst that I had is actually Foka Barson, who is the person who directed my first film. Because at the point where I was banging my head against the wall trying to figure out what to do with my screenwriting, he came along and showed me that there's a way to actually get your voice heard and get your films made in the independent film community. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be on the journey that I am. There would be no Be Home Soon. There wouldn't be any Mist. There wouldn't be any Swung. Or any of the other projects that we've got slated. So there's a great thing about meeting the right person at the right time. Sometimes it's when you're at the crossroads. Sometimes it's when you're in the you're in the deepest pit of despair. But in other times you think you're going along just fine, and then it's like a lightning bolt out of the blue that kind of helps you do a course correction that changes the vector of your life.
Catalyst and a mentor are different.
Yeah. So the
How
great
are they
thing.
different?
Yeah. So the great thing about mentors is that they're people that really kind of guide you, in small correcting steps. It's, if you think about like a catalyst as being the thing that kind of blows up the rock, of a mountain. The mentor is the person that takes a gemstone that they find and kind of smooths it into something that's really worthwhile. Mentors usually are ones that kind of help you on a path that you're already on. They kind of smooth the rough edges, and their effects are great and deep, but it's more of something that's done over time. Whereas a catalyst is something that changes you instantly. Like that time, like when I was in 7th grade and all of a sudden I realized, wow, you could actually be cool and do computers. I didn't know you could do that. What, you mean that there's a whole world that I need to care about? And hey, when I do stuff like that, it makes me feel good about myself and my fellow man. That's amazing. What, you mean I don't have to sit here and just kind of, just cry over these scripts that I've never done anything with, that I could actually take some control over the direction of my career and move forward? I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff. And I've been lucky that a lot of these people are still in my life, but sometimes they don't have to be.
Now, watch how I develop this next question, because you're a movie person. So I'm gonna bring up one of my favorite movies, The Wizard of Oz. Watch how I develop this. So there was a great one of the scenes early when she lands in Oz. She asks, "Are you a good witch or a bad witch?" So my question to you, based on that, is: are there bad catalysts?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are times of trauma in people's lives. That's the worst example of a catalyst. Somebody who's who's murdered a loved one or relative. You could have people that are sexual assault or rapists. I mean, those are bad catalysts, obviously, for obvious reasons. But there are also ones where there are people that actually kind of incite people to do things they normally wouldn't do, but they push them towards the bad side of humanity. The person who convinces somebody to take drugs, certain types of drugs. That there's that. There are people. I mean, you think about the idea that in Jonestown only a third of the people had to be forced to take the Kool-Aid. The other 2/3 drank it willingly. You think of the Manson family, and there are more modern examples as well. But there are people that kind of become catalysts and push people in directions either through lies and manipulation, or empty promises that they'll do things that they never would have done before. So there is definitely good and bad catalysts. The tough part is that, except for some extreme examples, it could sometimes be difficult to identify which is which.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. How do you tell the difference between good or bad catalyst?
Yeah, so it's difficult. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff is recognizable through hindsight. I think it was Steve Jobs had actually said that if you look at your life from the beginning to the end, it looks like there's jagged path that you've taken with all these crossroads. But if you look back from the end to the beginning, it's a straight line, right? And so, it's very easy to look back and see, well, this isn't good. But some of the good examples of how to identify them is, does this person make you want to do things that you're uncomfortable with? Or if you were to look at it objectively, that you think others would find uncomfortable. The idea that like if you look at the Manson family, I mean, it's like, well, you send somebody to go and kill a bunch of people. Well, that might be a bad person. That might be a bad catalyst. If you have the other thing is to actually, and this is the tough part, is does the person that you're following actually tell you things that are different than objective reality does? And I mean, we see a lot of that. Unfortunately, we see a lot of it in politics. But I mean, even if you go back into the 70s, I mean, there was, or actually, you go back even further. There were people that said that smoking wasn't bad for you. There was people that said fossil fuels did not lead to acidification of the ocean or climate change. And there are people still today that don't want to believe those things. But that's, when you have people that are actually getting you to fight against what is objectively measurable as being bad, that's probably a pretty good indication that they're not a good catalyst.
Is there anybody? It's funny you said something about. I always like to bring up movie stuff with you about smoking. One day, 500 years in the future, they're probably going to discover that smoking is actually good for you. It's from Sleeper. Woody.
Yeah.
But is there anybody special in your life that you wanted to talk about, and how they changed your life? Or you already mentioned, like Kathy and Foka.
Yeah. And Mags. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are the major people. I mean, there have been a couple of other people along the way that have kind of changed my life path. When I was a sophomore in college, actually, there was this gentleman, Pitt Stonier, and Pitt was, I mean, a very charismatic person, and we had actually worked at putting together a system that would have been it was actually a precursor to the idea of using a debit card. So we'd actually set up an entire system.
Wow.
That would allow for someone to have this card. It was called the High Tech Group. And, if you had this card, you could actually make purchases and it would debit from your bank account rather than, being a credit card. And, we had been moving forward with that for at a pretty good pace, and we were on track to actually launch it. And we just needed to get some companies to kind of partner with us in order to move it forward. And I remember we had made a presentation to a certain large banking institution that in Manhattan that we can't mention by name, but soon after we made the pitch, they stopped calling us, and within a year, they had come out with using the credit card system as a way to do debit card transactions. So, yeah. So that, but the thing is, Pitt had actually lit an entrepreneurial fire in me in order to realize that sometimes, using your creativity that isn't just restricted to the arts. You could actually use it as a way to function in business. And I've actually had a couple of companies of my own that I had a company where we were doing internet development in the mid 90s up until pretty much 9/11 really killed that business. And then after that, I had a location analytics company that I had started with somebody that I met at Stevens. So, but for the major changes in my life, the people that I've already talked about are the ones that have really changed me so drastically that if you had met me before and then met me after, you would have noticed a different gait that I had, a different spring in my step.
Winding down, how can is there a trick, a tool? How can people be more receptive to catalysts in their life? How do they know they're being energized? Is the,
Well, yeah, so sometimes, we could actually meet the right person at the right time and then not be affected by them. And it's usually because we don't go into things with an open mind, right? We don't look at being receptive to the to new ideas. We close them off. I mean, a lot of this has to do with a lot of our innate biases, right? So, I mean, we all have biases for certain things, and it kind of gets back to something we discussed a little bit about before, which is this kind of Yankees Red Sox mentality that a lot of people have, where it's like, if I'm a Yankee fan and you're from Boston, well, you're a piece of garbage. And if you're a Red Sox fan and, from New York, you feel the same way. And, the thing is that, by putting up these roadblocks, these biases that we have, we actually we stall that process. We become the containment rods that don't allow the reactions to occur. So really, to be receptive is sometimes to just have an open mind when talking to people, and actually consider ideas, for their value, rather than just immediately dismissing them because they don't fit into your narrow worldview. That's the big piece of it.
one of the keys I've observed in my life is the whole notion of being receptive, putting yourself out there, making believe you're an antenna. And what I've learned in my life with the things that have influenced me is, if I am an antenna and I am receptive, the more you put yourself out, the more you receive.
Right.
Just and I think that's part of it. So Keith Armonaitis, this is your life. Any final thoughts as we kind of wind down our little time together?
Yeah, there's the flip side of it, Cal, which is, how to be a catalyst for others. And it also involves, keeping an open mind and actually listening to people when you interact with them. Sometimes, people don't realize what others are going through simply because they speak, and when they listen, they're only listening for the next time that they could say something. They're not really kind of absorbing what the other person is saying, and sometimes in there are clues. I mean, when it came to some of the interactions I had, it was just because it was the right place, the right time, and I needed a change. But as I've grown older and I started meeting people, like Kathy, and when I met Foka, I mean, these were changes where, I think what happened was Kathy, she just recognized that I was receptive to some of the ideas that she was talking about. They may have had an ulterior motive initially, but very quickly she realized that, I understood what was going on. And these are things that I started to, internalize. And I mean, to this day, I mean, I actually have a solar array on my house because, I don't want to, perpetuate, fossil fuel usage, for power generation. I mean, so I put something on the back of my house, and my electricity bill is a few dollars a month. It actually it's reaped benefits for myself, but if other people did it as well, it would reap benefits for them and the environment. With Foka, he very quickly realized when we started talking that, it was my frustration was about, what I had wanted to do, with my writing. And, he listened and he realized that he could show me another way, that I would be receptive. I just didn't know what to do. And you know, him listening to that has actually helped to create a very fruitful partnership that, you know, I've appreciated for the year, you know, for, I guess it's been about 4 years since we met, and you know, things just seem to get better and better. I mean, we've had a little bit of a pause this past year, but you know, after COVID is open and we can start shooting again, we're going to come out swinging.
Great.
Yeah.
So it's funny, as we kind of wrap this up, I didn't say at the outset that you and I had sat down a few other times for interviews, but one of our famous interviews, you arrived here one Sunday morning. The sun had kind of risen a bit,
Mm.
and you left. The sun was gone.
Yeah.
And that bespeaks the nature of the friendship and the relationship and the exchange of ideas. So we haven't done the sun thing yet, because the sun is still out there beyond the blinds. But this was actually quoting another movie. I always love to quote movies around you. The one of the last scenes in the movie Norma Ray, when Ron Liebman's character's telling Sally Field, I love that movie, what we've had has been sumptuous. And that was the word he used. So, hey, Keith, what we've had now has been sumptuous.
Thank you, Cal.
Yeah, so
I
this was
appreciate
great.
you taking the time.
Yeah, we've been trying to get this done for a while, and we did it. And I can't thank you enough for this. And your messages here are so enduring, and I hope a bunch of people see them. So I wish you a happy Saturday, because that's
Thank
what
you.
it is, and to be continued. For sure, and I can't thank you enough, Keith.
Well, thank you, Cal. You have a great day.
You be well.